Have you ever heard that voice before from maybe one of your clients? Does it ring a bell? Anyone you know sound like that person?
And questions about his relationship with Makiva after she learned about one of his affairs.
That she actually told you that
yo, what's
abortion?
Poppin', family? Welcome to the stream. I'm back on. Probably be on for a couple hours. Probably
when she got, when they get mad,
about 2.
Like, oh,
it's almost 12.
I still
Probably
got
about
the
2.
divorce papers. I'm like, baby, no, I'm not doing anything. I got on my knees. Baby, no, I'm not doing anything. Nothing.
And then a key question about Makiva being pregnant.
You never told me she was pregnant.
I thought I never told you that?
No. And if that was important to you, you would have told me.
I thought I told you that.
No, I would have known. I didn't find out till autopsy.
I didn't tell you that, for real?
I would have remembered that, because then I would have known it was 2 murders instead of 1.
I think I told you that.
And then why, when he was left alone by the gunman upstairs outside the bedroom, he took no action.
Since you had your phone on you during this duration, you're upstairs on that 2nd floor landing when Quay's downstairs with the gunman. Just have to ask you, why didn't you call 911 at that time?
Did I have my phone? I don't know.
Okay.
I didn't even remember I had my phone on.
His brother-in-law Quay had wanted to jump the gunman.
We down on the ground. I'm trying to whisper to your ear like, man, let's do something. Oh, man, how you just gonna let this man walk into your house like this and not do nothing? We gotta do something.
Why else would anyone want to go into your house and pay like that? Because it's clear that that's their whole intention was to just kill her.
There's no other reason.
So, was he a suspect? Sure, I had no doubt he was a suspect. I mean, that's just the way things work when one spouse is killed and the other is not, and you're both there at the same time.
Thank you for calling Northwestern Mutual. This is Carrie. How can I help you?
Then detectives learned about a call Yuri Jenkins made a few days after the murder, trying to collect on his wife's $500,000 life insurance policy.
Yeah, that's wild.
I understand you have some questions.
Mm-hmm. About the beneficiary information?
And you were the spouse, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm actually seeing on the application here that you were not listed as beneficiary.
Oh, wow. Is it the kid?
No, and unfortunately I can't disclose that. That's considered confidential, and I can only speak to the beneficiary on file.
Okay, I gotta figure out who is. Oh, wow. Dang, she didn't change it in time.
Makiva didn't change the policy in time. I mean, that to me is like, well, why would you say that? Why would you say that?
Detectives thought Yuri's friend Dimitri Dale might know the answer.
Have a seat and the one where we write in. I just gotta have my partner do something. There you go. All right.
And the key breakthrough was when they interviewed Dimitri Dale.
And you came of your own free will, but because this is an ongoing criminal investigation, I'm going to do my standard read your Miranda warnings like I've done pretty much the last few times. Yeah.
Detectives had learned that the white Dodger getaway car actually belonged to Dimitri Dale.
It was hard for Dimitri Dale to explain why his car was there on the side of the road.
And I'm 40. You got into some shit.
And the Dale cell phone showed repeated calls to a man by the name of Jovan Joseph.
And ultimately, he seemed to have a consciousness of guilt. He wanted to talk.
Dale connected the dots between Joseph and Yuri.
Joseph was the hitman. Joseph was the person who murdered Makiva. And Joseph was tied to Yuri through Dimitri Dale. Dimitri Dale was the conduit.
And he said Joseph was demanding the $20,000 he was promised by Yuri for the murder.
He did. How did Joseph express his displeasure with the fact that Yuri hasn't given him anything?
He just told me he was gonna body him. That's what he told me.
Body means
Kill him.
And when he cracked, that opened up the floodgates.
I mean, if there's any information I can give you, I have no problem with that, because at the end of the day, I know, and I told you this from day one.
Why did you cover for these guys so long? It took me 5 interviews to finally get you.
Because I was going to say something in the very beginning, but I didn't, because at the end of the day, all odds were against me. At that home that day when you guys were there, It was everybody's family but mine.
Yeah, but if you would have been straight with us, don't you realize they would have probably been arrested within a day?
I know that, and a lot of people was mad at me.
Hello?
Yeah, you're.
And Dale had one more surprise for the detectives. He had secretly recorded his phone calls with Yuri.
But murdering my wife? Man, bro, listen, dog. I'm not going to jail for that, man.
Police today arrested a suspect in the murder of Makiva Jenkins on what would have been her 34th birthday. 19-year-old Devon Joseph was indicted by a grand jury on a charge of first-degree murder.
Mr. Joseph, would you like to say anything to her family?
Jovan Joseph was in fact the person Makiva's brother had seen and heard at their house that day, talking to Yuri and Dimitri Dale.
Yeah, the shooter and Dimitri, they were good buddies. I was mad, you know. I was just utterly devastated, disappointed.
All right, what's going on?
And now the phone calls of Yuri, secretly recorded by Dimitri Dale, would become pivotal to the investigation.
No, just walk out the room. Don't say my name. Ring your phone, none of that.
All right.
Even the beginning of the recordings were pretty damning because at the beginning, Dimitri said Yuri's name, and Yuri's like, no, don't use my name. Don't say my name.
And Yuri told Dimitri their secret was safe, that he would never turn on him or Jovan Joseph.
Tell that man, don't let them people stand you up, bro. I wouldn't do that, man. I would never do that, bro. Never.
Yeah.
If there's 5 recordings between them, my client doesn't know he's being recorded.
Man, they don't have any evidence, bro. None.
But if I got locked up, would you help to get me out?
Yes, I would. Without a shadow of a doubt, bro.
All right.
Yes, I would.
And that's all I need to know, man.
Without a shadow of a doubt, bro.
Yuri had already covered for Joseph and Dale when he was questioned by Detective Oliver.
Dale came over earlier in the day with somebody, and I just want to show a picture. I want to confirm this is the guy. Is that who came over earlier in the day or not?
Oh, yeah, he came and got a haircut.
All right, but Quay also mentioned you. Isn't that the guy that was here earlier with Dale?
Yeah, he did say that, but I was like, no, man, that's not him. Don't get me wrong, you feel me? They asked me about him, and I said I ain't know the dude. All I did was cut his hair. They showed me a picture of him. I said, man, no, man, I just cut that man's hair.
It's easy to blame everyone else. It's time for you to accept responsibility.
Now, 5 months after the murder, Detective Oliver is hoping to get a confession from Yuri Jenkins, telling him the evidence is strong against him.
But why do you think that you're sitting here right now?
Because of what you just said. Them was trying to say I gave him some money.
Yeah, you did. People rolled. I'm just going to be straight out with it.
People rolled? What do you mean people rolled?
Javon, Dimitri.
Rolled over and did what?
They gave up information.
What kind of information?
Well, the fact that you contracted Javon to do this. That's what he says. $1,500 up front. You came in at $20,000 after you got the insurance. This is what they're saying.
I don't care about nobody rolling no bull like that. Man, I don't give a damn about them.
I know you're feeling confident because you didn't pull the trigger. I know you didn't pull the trigger.
Man, I would not kill my wife, man.
Well, of course you wouldn't, but you had somebody do it.
Come on, Detective.
You had life insurance to gain.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you did.
No, I didn't, man. Where is that?
You thought you were getting the 500.
Man, no, I didn't.
And then Detective Oliver raised the TV news interview Yuri did the day after the murder.
You never said you missed her or loved her, and you do not show the expressions or the demeanor from a man who loved his wife and was visited and upset she was killed. Yeah, from the point she was killed on.
All right, man.
You did? Okay.
Just because I don't cry and hoot and holler in front of people, man, that's not me.
Honestly, everybody can go to hell.
I have no doubt in my mind, none whatsoever, Yuri. And I've been doing this job a long time. All right? And I don't expect you to admit it, because you got to protect yourself. All you're thinking is about Yuri.
Evan, I appreciate the follow. Appreciate it.
There's a selfish
JJ, I appreciate the share.
You've been selfish your whole life.
That's a lie.
You depended on Makiva, and she wanted to divorce you, and you knew the gravy train's going to end I better collect.
God vindicate me.
And all of that ultimately leads to Yuri being charged and indicted.
Tote that motherfucker, Arts. Let's go.
Yuri, did you kill your wife?
No, I didn't.
You said you were innocent.
I am innocent.
Then what happened?
God will vindicate me. God will vindicate me. I'm innocent. Yes, I am.
Yeah, it was just so hard to accept it. I didn't want to accept it. But I really realized that, hey, you know, you really did that. And he thought he could get away with it.
Suspect is in custody. Suspect is in custody.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have been selected and sworn as the jury to try the case of the state of Florida versus Yuri Durrell Jenkins. This is a criminal case.
You don't have direct evidence of Yuri. You don't have a confession. So how do you prove it? Sometimes you have to make a deal with the devil. And we did.
The prosecution had made a generous plea bargain deal with Jovan Joseph.
The hitman got 15 years in prison.
And an even more generous deal with the middleman, Dimitri Dale, who pleaded guilty to manslaughter.
Dimitri got 15 years of probation, and so he didn't serve any time.
I've been doing this 37 years, and I've never seen a deal like that with a co-defendant in a first-degree murder case, ever. They were willing to apparently do just about anything to get to my client.
Is the state ready, and do they wish to give an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please proceed.
Thank you. To paraphrase a famous murder mystery novelist, the motives for murder usually come down to the 3 L's: loathing, lusting, and/or lucre. Those 3 L's are exactly why that defendant, Yuri Jenkins, made the decision to hire someone to kill his wife, to get out of a marriage he was unhappy in, and to get a payday he thought was coming to him, but turned out not to be so. You don't have to like witnesses, and in fact, I highly doubt that you will. There is no excuse for what Dimitri Dale did in terms of his participation, and there is certainly no excuse for what Jovan Joseph did. But we're confident that when you get to the end of the trial, it'll be clear that they are telling the truth, because it's the only reasonable explanation as to why a 19-and-a-half-year-old man who had no connection with Makiva would commit such a cold-blooded murder.
Thank you. Defense like to make an opening statement.
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
The government used this phrase in their opening statement of 3 L's. This is a trial, though, about credibility and why people simply are not to be believed when they try to cover their tracks as to why they committed a crime, in this case, Mr. Dale and Mr. Joseph. They have to testify in a way that convinces the prosecution that they are being truthful, despite the fact that they are both admitted liars, despite the fact that they have a history of not telling the truth, despite swearing to tell the truth. And we submit to you that if you really pay attention to that testimony and look at those witnesses and judge those witnesses' credibility, that at the end of this case, there's only going to be one fair and just verdict as to this matter, and that's a not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Would you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
Dimitri Dale. Last name is D-A-L-E.
Adrian Ellis led the team, and when you have something this serious, when so much is at stake, you want to put your best people. And she's there as one of my best people.
So I want to talk about the elephant in the room, which is you swear to tell the truth and you don't. Is that right?
That's correct.
Why should this jury believe that you are going to tell them the truth today?
It took a while for me to accept responsibility, or some responsibility, well, most responsibility for my actions, and I think at the very least, you know, the family of Makiva Jenkins deserves justice, and I no longer want to stand in the way of her receiving the justice that is deserved to her.
And Dale began with why he said Yuri wanted his wife killed.
And I said, well, why you want to do that, you know? And I just kind of went into details about all she did. And he was just like, man, he was in the shower, you know, he had sex with her, and his penis couldn't get fully erect, and so therefore, he knew he didn't love her no more. He was serious and asked, did I know anyone? I said, no. I just don't hang around people that, you know, kill people. But, and then I opened the door and I asked Yvonne, I said, do you know anybody that'll do something like that? He was just, and then that's how Yuri and Javon pretty much engaged in the conversation. Javon basically was saying, like, you know, how much would you be willing to pay? And then that's when conversations about an amount came up. And that was pretty much the gist of the conversation.
Mr. Dale, did you, the defendant, and Javon Joseph plan the death of Makiva Jenkins?
I won't use the word plan, but subsequently we got together, and as a result, she's dead.
Because I have nothing for you. And I take you still. Still let them cross the thing.
My strategy was to work on the conflicts, the lies, the constant lies, the number of lies that both of them had told.
Defense lawyer Greg Lehrman kept a running tally of the lies that Dale admitted on the stand that he had told during the investigation.
You were adamant that you had nothing to do with this homicide, correct?
That's it.
You didn't give Detective Oliver any indication at all that you knew where the gun had come from or anything of that sort, correct?
That's correct.
And that you had no knowledge of anything regarding this case.
That was a lot.
It's always a challenge for prosecutors because bad guys don't hang out with choir boys. You're gonna have people hang out with liars and murderers.
Well, I'm his friend. He's my friend. There's no Javon Joseph without me. There's no killing Makiva without Yuri.
Well, there's no killing Makiva without you and Mr. Joseph.
No. Yuri Jenkins is the one that initiated all of it, because no one would ever talk to kill Makiva if it didn't come from his mouth.
Guess that'll be for somebody else to decide, sir.
That's correct.
Jurors are told that if you disbelieve a witness on one thing, you can disbelieve their entire testimony.
Would you please state your name and spell your last name for the members of the jury? For the record.
My name is Javon Marquise Joseph.
The hitman, Jovan Joseph, recounted how Yuri guided him to Makiva's bedroom as members of her family watched it all.
Did you say anything to him while he was going upstairs?
No, ma'am.
Why not?
Because he was in on the plan.
And what do you mean in on it?
This was his plan.
Plan to do what?
Kill Makiva. Yuri, he motions towards me, you know, which room she's in. And that's when I laid him down. I go in the room. Once I go in the room, you know, I see a figure in the bed. It's dark. I'm like a couple feet away. I aim towards her head. That's when I shoot her.
How many shots did you fire?
One.
Now, why did you shoot her in the head?
Because I was trying to finish the job.
And then, as Joseph gave more details,
he told me that Yuri was trying to throw us.
Judge, we have instructed all of the family members, Makiva's family members, that there can be no outburst, no show of emotion, no display of emotion, and we will do it again. Judge, we instruct them every day.
Cross-exam, Mr. Tufani?
When court resumed, the defense sought to use its cross-examination of the hitman to paint the real mastermind as Dimitri Dale, not Yuri Jenkins.
So the only things you know about what supposedly Mr. Jenkins wants is what Mr. Dale is telling you, correct?
Yes, not through his mouth too when I met him.
Other than the times you talked to him is what I'm saying.
Yes, sir.
The only other statements that you hear about what Mr. Jenkins is trying to get messages to you are coming through Mr. Dale.
Yes, sir.
You're not having them directly with Mr. Jenkins, correct? Okay.
The other big issue is money. Dale denies ever getting any money.
Well, he handed a pile of cash to Mr. Dale.
Yes, sir.
They can't possibly both be telling the truth. They're either both lying or one of them is lying.
I'm drawing your attention to this text on July 2nd, 2017 at 12:49 p.m. Is that a text message that you're familiar with?
Yes, sir.
And in that text message you say, bro, bring me 20, I need it for gas, meet me somewhere, that's correct?
Yes, sir.
So that's about 3 days after you got $10,000 in cash, you need money for gas.
Yes, sir.
Here are these guys that said they got cash, and 2 days later, they're asking for $20 for gas, and then the response to asking for $20 for gas by Jovan Joseph is Dale saying, well, I'm broke. Well, how is that possible?
And Joseph contradicted Dale's testimony that Dale didn't know much about guns.
And whose idea was it to get a revolver?
Dale's idea.
And why did he say to get a revolver?
Leaves no shells.
Leaves no shells? You know, what does that mean to you, leaves no shells?
It's not enough evidence for the police to collect.
Like the cartridge, when you shoot the gun, it doesn't leave a shell on the floor?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Mr. Dale's the one who explained that to you, correct?
Yes, sir.
Nothing further, Judge. Thank you.
Call your next witness.
As Joseph was led away to return to prison, the prosecution called its key eyewitness, McKeeva's brother.
At this time, the state will call Quavius Greer.
Okay.
My back was to the entrance to the courtroom, as was Yuri's. And the next thing we know, he's running towards my client, and he's basically tackled by a number of deputies and literally carried out of the courtroom.
Oh yeah, I was gonna try to kill him. I really didn't care what happened to me after that. They took my sister away from me. So I couldn't deal with that, and it was just hard for me, man, and I couldn't stomach it no more. I really didn't care no more what happened to me from that point on.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, can I have you all go out into the jury room, please? Please don't discuss anything about the case back there.
It gave the defense clear grounds to ask for a mistrial.
All right. What's okay? Mr. Lerman, have you made a decision what you'd like to do?
The judge would have been more than happy at that point to grant a mistrial, but at the same time, we would have been waiting another 6 or 7 months, if not longer, for a new trial date. And my client didn't want to wait, and we didn't want to wait. We wanted to get it done. We are not asking for this trial, we're asking for the third trial.
Okay. Okay, let's bring Mr. Greer back in, please.
Quay was brought back into the courtroom with deputies closely watching his every move.
I don't want you to say anything to Mr. Jenkins again. If it happens again, you are likely to have the court find you in direct criminal contempt. Do you think that you can control your emotions and your actions?
So I want to start by apologizing to the judge, and I want to apologize for my actions and how I disrupted everything.
The prosecution needed Quay's testimony as the one eyewitness who was not part of Yuri's alleged murder plot.
When you were both lying down on the ground and you said to him, hey, is that the guy, or you made some comment to him about it possibly being the friend that came over earlier, you recall that?
Yes, I recall.
So at that point, did he ever say, hey, maybe you're right?
No, he never said that.
Did he ever say, this is some information that we probably need to let the detective or let the police know when they come?
No.
You know, I had to do it for Kiva. And then I really had to be Makiva up there on that stand. I had to be her voice.
Was there ever a point at all throughout this whole entire ordeal that you were left alone, not with the gunman?
No, there was never a time where I was left alone without the gunman.
Was the defendant left alone?
Yes.
Does Mr. Jenkins wish to testify? It is your decision that you do not wish to take the stand, is that correct? All right, thank you, Mr. Jenkins. All right.
No, we didn't call any witnesses because I felt that the case didn't need it.
Both the state and the defendant have now rested their case. The attorneys now will present their final arguments. Is the state ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please do so.
We're here today because of the defendant, Yuri Jenkins. And to quote Dimitri Dale, who took the stand a few days ago, he said, none of this would have happened but for Yuri Jenkins. Yuri Jenkins is the reason Makiva Jenkins is dead. The defendant obviously wanted to be with someone else. You heard about the loathing. He was no longer sexually attracted to his wife, period. He told Dimitri Dale that. Why would Dimitri Dale make that up? He made money cutting hair in his garage as an unlicensed barber. This was not a marriage that he could afford to leave. Yuri Jenkins told just as many lies as the people the defense will tell you not to believe. Not only does he lie, but he repeatedly tries to derail the investigation, even away from Dimitri Dale and Jovan Joseph. He didn't even say, hey, well, look into them. The defendant orchestrated and caused the death of his wife.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Lerman, are you ready to proceed? Please do so.
Good afternoon, welcome back. Yuri Jenkins now sits before you waiting for your judgment. He is not guilty of first-degree murder. This case is about lies and liars. Plain and simple. It is about lies and liars, and not Mr. Jenkins, but Mr. Dale and Mr. Joseph. It is about people who are unable and incapable of telling the truth. We know that Dimitri Dale planned this. We know that Dimitri Dale planned this without Yuri Jenkins' knowledge. It is the burden of the government to provide you with truthful, honest, sworn testimony. And when you have substantial material conflicts from that witness stand, that is a corruption of their burden. That is a failure on their part. And it is a conflict that, along with everything else in this case, calls for a not guilty verdict.
All rise, court is back in session.
Good morning, please be seated.
They were out, I think, around 2 hours and 50 minutes in total. Yuri, he seemed calm. I mean, he had high hopes. I was optimistic.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I have been advised that the jury has reached a verdict.
State of Florida versus Yuri Darrell Jenkins, defendant. Verdict. We, the jury, find as follows. As to count one, we find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder as charged in the indictment.
Makiva's grandmother, Gloria Hurl, who had raised her like a daughter, wanted to make sure Yuri Jenkins knew the full measure of what he had done.
Go right ahead, ma'am.
I just want to say to everybody, this has been a long struggle for me. And what has happened to my daughter has affected my life and the life of my family. I have nothing bad to say about him. All I wanted was justice for my child. And now, nobody wins in this case. They came to the verdict I wanted them to have, but on neither side was a winner. I know how he has made his family feel, because they had no idea he could do something like this. I just want everybody to find peace after this. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Ms. Ellis, is there anything else?
Yeah.
Judge, I believe this is it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hill. All right. Mr. Jenkins, the court having found you guilty of first-degree murder, I'm required to sentence you to a term of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole.
We never sought the death penalty in this case. This was justice. It's not perfect, but justice did come because the person who did this, the person most culpable, was Makiva's husband, who she trusted and loved, and he betrayed her in many different ways.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Facebook.
She was a kind, loving person who made the mistake of marrying a really deceptive, awful individual who was motivated by greed and by a dissatisfaction with his marriage. He deserved life in prison, and he got it.
Molly Tibbetts. This case is her story. This case is the story of Molly's disappearance and the story of Molly's murder.
This is the Molly Tibbetts missing persons case.
Molly Tibbetts.
Molly Tibbetts. Despite search efforts over the last few days, there is still no sign of that missing woman.
This was something huge that was happening.
We have raised $172,000 that will be paid to you as soon as Molly is safely home.
We knew she was jogging. We knew she was abducted on the jog.
They had seen a figure that looked like a runner about the time and in the area where Molly would have been running on the night she disappeared.
A black Chevy Malibu that appeared to be circling the area. Who was driving that car?
Authorities have arrested a man for the murder of missing University of Iowa student Molly Tibbetts.
And he's brought in and he is questioned from you for 11 plus hours. Isn't that right? Yes.
She comes out at one point and says, "This is definitely your killer, but I'm stuck here, guys. I'm gonna need some help."
You're f***ing up right now. You're f***ing up big time.
Who better to pick than an undocumented immigrant who doesn't speak the language?
You stabbed Molly Tibbetts. Isn't that right?
Your wife is in a bar. You said she's unresponsive.
This is what he's going to tell you. How to get out of that situation.
And I grabbed the gun.
Trying to find the first place to put a body.
No, sir.
The only thing they could do was kill him.
You want to say anything? We, the jury, and to find the defendant.
Molly Tibbetts case, this 20-year-old missing University of Iowa student who was last seen on July 18th, last seen jogging in Brooklyn, Iowa.
We're trying to get the word out. We want Molly home safe.
So far, we've been searching by air and foot both.
We just really hope that we can get her found and brought back home to the people that love her.
And I think everybody in the country has adopted Molly, so let's keep at it. Let's go get her.
5'2", approximately 120 pounds, brown eyes. There is up to a $320,000 reward. Beautiful young lady you see there in the football game.
So listening to this, it definitely hit close home to me. This was something huge that was happening, and it could potentially happen to me.
It has been 4 days since Molly Tibbetts disappeared. Despite search efforts over the last few days, there is still no sign of that missing woman.
We believe that Molly is still alive, and if someone has abducted her, we are pleading with you to please release her.
Everybody has a Molly in their life, a person that has affected them in a way
that she affected everybody standing up here right now. And imagine if this was you, somebody had taken your Molly. Wouldn't you want to help? Wouldn't you want her back? How would you feel? Just do the right thing and, you know, let her go.
My initial thought that came to my head, because it happens a lot, is when we have missing people, is some sort of drug overdose, some sort of mental illness due to drugs. Not knowing anything about Molly, that's kind of what I thought I was heading into.
But Agent Trent Valletta soon learned that theory did not fit Molly, seen here the day before she disappeared at the daycare center where she was working for the summer. At the University of Iowa, she was majoring in child psychology.
She was very loved on campus. She was probably one of the nicest humans that anybody had ever met. Nobody had a bad thing to say about her.
She doesn't fit our normal victim profile. It kind of gives you the hairs on your back kind of stand up when you suddenly realize, oh my goodness, you know, did something really terrible happen here?
So authorities swarmed the town of Brooklyn, Iowa.
I think it's roughly 1,400 or 1,500 people. People still leave their doors unlocked.
And began to retrace Molly's steps before she disappeared, starting at the home of her boyfriend where she had been staying.
That evening on the 18th of July, she went for a run right around 7:30, 7:45 in the evening.
She was an avid runner, and that was pretty common for her to run in the evenings. She left the house and didn't come back.
She would have left home, run through town, and then gone on a blacktop east of Brooklyn, which was one of her normal running routes.
She was in constant contact with her boyfriend Dalton, and when that contact suddenly ceased and there's no contact, the proverbial hand on the panic button was pressed. Picked up the phone and called the FBI because I was assuming we had an adult abduction, which in Iowa and I think even nationwide are incredibly rare.
The FBI brought in drones to scour the acres and acres of cornfields around the town.
What the FBI is doing right now is trying to prioritize leads.
And for 4 or 5 weeks, all those leads came up empty, and we really had nothing at that point in time.
We knew she was jogging. We knew she was abducted on the jog, but we didn't, no witnesses to the abduction, no cameras video of the abduction.
But investigators then realized that Molly never went anywhere without her cell phone, even on her runs, and they were able to get her password.
It's amazing how simple things kind of escape us sometimes. So we just went to Walmart, bought an iPhone, entered her password, and we literally cloned her phone. So we had all that data.
And a way to track Molly's jogging route along County Road 385.
And so she's going at a speed of less than 10 miles an hour up until a point. Her phone stops for a couple minutes, and then you can see with the next pings at the cell phone tower that she's traveling at approximately 60 miles an hour. It told me that she's in a vehicle, that she was jogging, there was a pause in her movement, and then she's in a vehicle.
Which actually took us close to the location of abduction.
There's always the hope that you'll find the person alive. But as hours become days, become weeks, you know, the hope that she'll be found alive becomes, you know, less and less.
Every day I feel Molly's presence with me. You know, sometimes I just feel her sitting on my shoulder. Molly's lending me her strength every day, every night. And yes, I have my moments of complete meltdowns, but it is through this strength that is somehow, and I don't know how, being bestowed upon me, that I am able to get through every morning, every noon, every night.
We spin our wheels. We spin our wheels for several weeks. We developed suspects that none of us really felt good about. But because of the resources we had, we literally ran the leads into the ground. Doing Background on Molly, she was telling all her family members she was going to marry Dalton. She knew he was about to propose.
Every investigation involving a disappearance or a homicide, officers are going to start with the inner circle of the victim and move their way out. Was Dalton Jack a suspect? Yes, he was.
But text messages between Dalton and Molly suggested not everything was happy.
There was some allegations that Dalton had a brief relationship with another young woman, but ultimately Molly had forgiven Dalton for whatever had been going on.
And detectives were able to determine that Dalton had been 2 hours away in Dubuque at the time she was abducted.
He was working construction on a road crew, fixing a bridge at that time over the Mississippi River, where it would have been physically impossible for him to be in Brooklyn, so he was ruled out fairly quickly.
So it was back to the area, all along County Road 385.
Sometimes we were kind of chasing our tails looking in the wrong direction. But then the canvassing never stopped.
They found a video from a resident who actually had 4 different cameras on his house and garage that when some of the investigators were reviewing this footage, they had seen a figure that looked like a runner about the time and in the area where Molly would have been running on the night she disappeared.
Just a glimpse, but an important one.
So the investigators, they began to look at all of the cameras and noticed a black Chevy Malibu as it appeared to be circling the area just after Molly had jogged through that same area.
Going one way, then another, and then back again, all within a few minutes of Molly passing by.
So that really became the focus of the investigation, was figuring out who was driving that car, and it was the thing, really, that broke the case.
The car guys there, they're like, well, these are non-factory mirrors, and their chrome mirrors are non-factory, and it's non-factory door handle. But how on God's green earth are we gonna ever find that car?
But the very next day, the car was spotted by an off-duty sheriff's deputy on his way home.
Lo and behold, the Malibu's coming right at him. And he calls me and says, hey, Trent, that car we're looking for, I'm behind it now. What do you want me to do? Just follow him home and say, hey, we're just looking for Molly. Have you guys seen or heard anything?
His name was Christian Bahena Rivera, an undocumented immigrant from Mexico working on a large Iowa corporate farm. He said he spoke no English.
So I scrambled. I had to find a Spanish speaker. We were at the point where everybody was shutting down. We just thought we weren't never going to find her. So everybody was gone. Most of the FBI was gone.
The nearest bilingual officer he could find was Pamela Romero from the Iowa City Police Department.
She was older for a new cop, so she had some good life experience, but very limited experience in those types of interviews. So she would take a lot of breaks and we would feed her questions and she would keep us updated, but we'd literally put a rookie cop in one of the biggest interviews probably in the history of the state, and it was a gut call. It was a total gut call.
The interview began around 6 in the evening. It would go on for more than 11 hours.
He really didn't give us much. Didn't say he knew Molly. Said he had very little knowledge that she was even missing. Wasn't going to be helpful. He didn't just know anything. So we made the decision, well, what we'll do then is we'll show him a picture of his car right by Molly. Basically the still photo of her jogging and his car, then a minute later driving behind her.
Okay.
Once we gave him that, then he's like, oh yes, now I remember who that is. It was a constant evolution. He kept, what's very chilling was he actually said, oh yeah, by the way, I have her missing persons poster in my house, which is your killer's trophy, right? That's when you know you got the right person.
But as the day turned to night, Agent Valletta still could not find a way to break him.
we kind of thought we were going to be done, or he was done talking to us, about to the point where he said he saw her, he thought she was hot, he turned around to look at her again, and then he couldn't find her, and then he left. That's kind of where we thought we were going to be done.
Hey, I'm going to hand the phone over to you.
The only card we had to play was the immigration status. I put him on the phone with ICE, we Mirandized him and just said, you're no longer free to go because of your immigration status. While he's on the phone, we are back to panic mode. What do we do now? How do we figure out where Molly is, because he's probably not going to talk anymore. That's when Pamela Romero comes up to us and says, hey, can I have one more shot? Can I have one more shot with this guy? He likes me, let me talk to him. So she goes back in. Everything changes.
It was now well past midnight at the sheriff's office in Montezuma, Iowa, and the interrogation of Christian Bahena Rivera was at a standstill.
There was, more than one occasion where he would kind of slump down in his chair, pull his hat down over his eyes, and appear to rest.
Officer Romero was in and out of the room, getting advice from lead investigator Trent Valletta.
She comes out at one point and says, this is definitely your killer, but I'm stuck here, guys. I'm gonna need some help.
Hey, Christian.
And it was your old school good cop, bad cop scene.
How are you feeling?
Lead investigator Trent Valletta and FBI agent Nick Potritz were going to turn up the heat.
Well, and I understand that you're trying. And because you have a bad problem.
Bahena Rivera had claimed he had a condition that caused him to black out and could not remember what happened to Molly.
I think it's the easy way out for people not trying to talk about how much of a monster they are. It's kind of a standard excuse for bad behavior. And so that's what Rivera says.
I'm trying to remember, but I'm trying for the memories to come back, to come out, but I know that I'm in trouble already, and if I know something, what's going to let you guys know?
We understand your problems because we've dealt with it before. You're not the first person that we've come across who's had this happen to us. Okay, Chris, you look at me now, okay? Just look at me. She's going to talk, but look at me, okay? It could be true that you don't remember everything. Do you understand that? Okay, but you do remember some things that we need to know. People that have this problem can forget everything. And I think you're scared. I think you're scared because you know what happened a little bit, but you're afraid to tell us. And that's okay. And it's okay to tell us.
I'm being nice to Rivera, very nice. I'm literally holding his hands, talking about integrity and how do you want to be perceived.
We have been around a long time. We are old. We are old. And we have sat across people that we don't like because they lie to us. And that's why we're happy now, because you are being honest with us. So we can get along. And we can work together to make sure that family gets their daughter back. Well, we know for sure is that girl was in your car.
Yes, like I mentioned to you already, I only remember her jogging running, but I never remember talking with her.
And then we basically had it set up that if he kept denying, Nick was just going to yell at him to stop playing games.
You are up right now. You are up big time. Stop up. Tell us the truth. He's getting mad at you. I'm getting close to getting mad. Christian, I can see in your eyes
Lo podemos mirar en tus ojos.
that there's something you're hiding from us.
Que tú lo estás ocultando.
I can tell.
Lo podemos mirar.
Then you know I'm right.
Y tú sabes que tenemos razón.
And it's really hard to tell me.
Sé que es difícil decirlo.
Because it's something you really wish never happened. But it's kind of, we have to go find that girl.
Pero ya es tiempo.
And you have to tell us what happened.
The good cop, bad cop routine seemed to have worked.
You want to talk to me alone? I'm asking him, you're not going to lie to me?
He answers, I'm going to tell you everything, everything I know.
You're going to tell me all you know? No games, no violence?
Do the right thing, okay?
Haz las cosas bien.
Do the right thing.
Porque yo no quiero que ellos regresen, ¿ok?
He tells her, because I don't want them to come back.
But he basically said, look, I can't tell you guys, but I'll tell her, which means he wanted to tell Pamela. So we left, and then his story evolved again.
And then the two of them alone, speaking in Spanish. I do remember that I was fighting with her. I remember that I brought her into my car. She had blood. I remember that we were in corn. I remember that's where I put her.
I would certainly characterize it as a confession that he had been the one and only person responsible for Molly Tibbetts' death. And they now had the Christian Rivera telling him that, yes, I can take you to her.
Yeah, we're about at 4:35 in the morning at that point. I remember just being covered in mud, crawling through these Iowa cornfields. You know, Rivera actually pointed out exactly where she's at.
She's covered in corn stalks. The thing that is the characteristic that stands out is she had very colorful running shoes, and those were visible.
Her clothes scattered about, the position of the badly decomposed body, indicating there had been a sexual assault.
Authorities have arrested a man for the murder of missing University of Iowa student Molly Tibbetts.
24-year-old Christian Rivera faces a first-degree murder charge.
He had led them to Molly's body. Her blood and DNA were found in the trunk of his car. And he had essentially confessed. The case seemed ironclad until prosecutors learned there was a problem with the Miranda warning given to Bahena Rivera during the interrogation. Nothing on this tape could be used at trial.
Damn, that's crazy. They go through all that work, spend all that time interviewing the man, don't even read him his rights. Don't even read him his rights. All that time. Can't use none of that shit in court. That is crazy. I wonder what they're gonna do now.
Well, we are
They might have
about
to.
to
They better
hear
have some
the
DNA or
opening
something on the
statements
body.
in this monumental case. There are a lot of eyeballs on
'Cause
what is
this is
happening right now.
wild.
This is a number of difficult issues, particularly about the undocumented immigrant issue.
And that issue had brought even more attention to the case, as politicians across the country had used Christian Bahena Rivera's undocumented immigration status as a campaign talking point.
You heard about today with the illegal alien coming in, very sadly, from Mexico.
Did not help our case, no. From our perspective, that was something that was somewhat of a minefield and not in any way a benefit to us.
Mr. Claver, on behalf of the state of Iowa, you may give your opening.
Thank you, Your Honor. Molly Tibbetts. This case is her story. This case is the story of Molly's disappearance and the story of Molly's murder. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what I expect the evidence in this case to show. The first is a video. The video that shows the defendant's black Chevy Malibu in the time and the area where Molly was last seen. Second aspect of the state's evidence for you to focus on is Molly's blood in the defendant's Malibu. And the third are the defendant's admissions. His admissions that he saw Molly, that he found her attractive, that he ran alongside her, that Molly threatened to call the police, that he became angry, that he fought with Molly. Ladies and gentlemen, when you examine this evidence together, there can be no other conclusion than that the defendant killed Molly Tibbetts.
Thank you, Mr. Claver. Does the defense elect to give their opening at this time?
Bahena Rivera was represented by the husband-wife team of Chad and Jennifer Freeze.
Your Honor, we will defer our opening to the conclusion of the state's case.
So it was straight to the state's case. And on day one, the prosecution called Molly's boyfriend, Dalton Jack. He said to deal with his heartbreak, he had enlisted in the Army.
I am in the 82nd Airborne Division as a sergeant, team leader, I guess, would be my official input position.
How would you describe Molly's personality?
She was always happy, bubbly, goofy. She just liked to have fun, pretty much, I guess.
Now the prosecution needed to establish Dalton's alibi, that he was in Dubuque.
What did you do whenever you got back to the hotel in Dubuque on July 18th around 6 p.m.?
Just drank beers with the guys and hung out.
Okay. Did you come back to Brooklyn for any reason?
No.
The next day, so Thursday, let's move to that, July 19th. Did you send Molly a message in the morning?
Yes, I sent her the same good morning message that I always send her.
And what is that good morning message?
Good morning, beautiful. like a kissy face or something like that.
Okay. Did you receive any response from her?
No.
But on cross-examination, the defense strategy became clear. Dalton was a young man with dark secrets.
You also told officers on that same interview information that you withheld before, right?
Correct.
And that information that you withheld before was that you'd had a relationship with a woman other than Molly, right?
Correct.
What did you tell officers the reason you withheld that information?
I didn't deem it necessary.
You didn't deem it necessary?
I didn't think that it was pertinent to the case.
So you didn't think it was pertinent to tell law enforcement officers that you having an affair on your true love was not pertinent to the case, right?
I was 19 years old.
Explain to me what you mean by that.
I was 19 years old. It was the beginning of the relationship, and I screwed up one time. Molly knew about it, and we got past it.
Let's talk about you, young man. You consider yourself to have a temper?
Not anymore.
You did, though, at one time?
Yes.
Pretty angry young man?
When I was about 17, 16, yes.
Tell me about the temper of the 16, 17-year-old Dalton Jack.
It was not good. It was short-fused.
Like to fight?
Yes.
And I think they were trying to poke the bear, so to speak. They were trying to get him irritated and to show that, you know, it's possible that Dalton was the killer.
Around the time that Molly was abducted or died, you told her a number of times that you thought you were depressed, right?
Correct.
So things weren't all rosy between you and Molly in the last 30 days before her abduction, were they?
No.
He was drugged through the mud. Dalton was drugged through the mud. He was literally sitting 15 feet away from a guy that brutally raped and stabbed his love of his life to death.
The state of Iowa may call its next witness.
Iowa City police officer Pamela Romero had conducted the 11-hour interrogation of Bahena Rivera and a follow-up round of questioning in the cornfield where the Miranda warning had been correctly stated.
Now, did you have a discussion with the defendant about the appearance of the runner, female runner that he saw?
Yes, I asked her what he thought of the female runner first, and his answer was, I found her attractive.
Did he ever use any other term other than attractive to describe the runner that he saw?
He stated at one point that he thought that she was hot.
And she described how Bahena Rivera later took her and other officers to this cornfield and pointed to the location of Molly's body.
He remembers that there was blood. He told me that he took her out of the car, put her on top of his shoulder, carried her inside into the cornfield, laying her down, covering her with corn.
Let's go, IU.
And leaving right away.
Did you ever then press him then on more details? How did you go about doing that?
His answer was, I brought you here, didn't I? So that means that I did it. I don't remember how I did it.
Pamela Romero, our officer, really hit a grand slam at trial. She did a phenomenally good job in recounting his interview, which is a difficult thing for a witness to do without a recording being played.
But on cross-examination, the defense did play speeded up stretches of the video with no audio, showing their client appearing to be asleep.
He fell asleep multiple times during breaks of this interview, isn't that right?
According to the recording, yes. During my presence, no.
This man, he works a tough job for 12 hours a day, 12 out of the 14 days a week, isn't that right?
That is what he told me, yes.
And then he's brought in and he is questioned from you on and off for 11 plus hours, isn't that right?
The interview went for 11 hours, yes.
And it was not until the very end, the last couple of hours, that he was willing to give you really any information. Is that right?
That's not the way that I took it.
Now, ma'am, you testified that you don't know anything about a false confession. Is that right?
Yes.
You don't know what the definition of a false confession is?
No, I do not.
You don't understand that concept whatsoever?
No, not at the moment, I do not.
Having planted the seeds of doubt about a possible false confession, raising questions about Molly's boyfriend Dalton, the defense was now ready to play.
But he took him to the crime scene. So what are y'all saying? That don't even make sense.
Its final card.
We have a shocker for you in Iowa in the Christian Bahena Rivera trial. The man accused of killing Molly Tibbetts.
Defense calls Christian Bahena Rivera.
The prosecution finished their case yesterday, and today the defense began their case.
And the defense called Molly Tibbetts' boyfriend, Dalton Jack, back to the stand for another effort to imply he might have been the killer.
At any point in the 12 months before Molly disappeared, did you ever tell her that you realized you were clinically insane?
I don't remember that at all either.
Did you mention to Molly that you have a temper?
I don't remember.
So he showed Dalton text messages he had sent to Molly saying just that.
You recall on October 30, 2017, you and Molly's relationship kind of hit a real bump, didn't it?
I don't recall that either.
That's when she told you she was moving in with friends.
Then yeah, I remember.
That upset you?
Yes, it did.
You told her you were angry about that?
Yes.
She was ditching you?
Yes.
You don't recall telling Molly that you had a temper?
No.
You don't recall saying that's what makes you dangerous?
No.
After a break for lunch, the defense sprung the surprise they had planned all along.
Defense calls Christian Bahena Rivera.
The defense hid it from us, which they can do. Even in their opening statement, they made no mention that he was going to testify.
Sir, I'm going to bring up on your screen, that is Defendant's Exhibit F.
Photos of Bahena Rivera and his family.
and the jury was able to see the defendant. They were able to get photos in. Actually, they were over our objection, so it personalized him to that point. So I think, you know, that was one of the things I was concerned about.
And then Bahena Rivera offered his version of what happened, showing where he said 2 men in ski masks and sweaters with weapons forced him to drive, where they passed Molly Tibbetts as she was running.
What happened next?
One of them got out of the car.
What happened next?
I've heard them opening the trunk.
What happened next?
I just heard a movement in the car, and then that the trunk closed.
And then, he testified, he was ordered to drive to the cornfield where Molly's body was eventually found, and the 2 masked men disappeared.
Did you look in the trunk?
Yes.
What did you see?
A body.
Was that the body of Molly Tibbetts?
Yes.
What did you do next?
Well, I stayed there a couple of minutes thinking what to do. And then I decided to take the body out.
Why didn't you call the police, sir?
Because I was scared.
Will the jury think it's fabulous, confabulated, or just an outright lie? Will they feel manipulated?
It's one of the biggest fish stories I've ever seen a defendant put on in a criminal trial.
He was unbelievable. Here you come up with this completely different story, you know, nearly 3 years later.
You claim that you went to a cornfield where Molly Tibbetts' body was placed with 2 other men.
Yes.
Whenever you left the cornfield, you left alone?
Yes.
The other 2 men that were there, did they just walk back?
They ran towards the road.
So they ran towards the road and just disappeared?
I didn't see them again. I don't know where they went.
The 2 men that you say you were with, you don't know who they are.
That's correct.
But you just happen to remember that one of them used the name Jack.
Yes.
The last name of Molly's boyfriend, Dalton Jack.
You stabbed Molly Tibbetts. Isn't that right?
No.
You're the one that did that. Isn't that true?
Didn't answer.
You alone took Molly Tibbetts into the corn. Isn't that right?
Yes.
The 2 men that you mentioned didn't help you do that. Is that right?
Correct.
And you left her there for nearly 5 weeks, correct?
Correct.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. You've heard a case and evidence about a young woman who went for a run on July 18th of 2018, and she never came home. She was confronted by this man. She crossed paths with him, and it ended her life. She was attacked brutally by him. She was stabbed repeatedly by him. Can you imagine what that was like for her? 5 weeks, Molly's body laid in that cornfield. And you know who knew about that? One man. One man knew, and he is here. His name is Christian Bahena Rivera. I want to break for just a second and talk about, just briefly, this man's testimony yesterday. Right? All of a sudden now we have these two men, right? He gets up and gives us this different version of what happened. You know what the problem is with it? It doesn't make sense. Why would this happen? Because he's angry? Because he wants to have some sort of relationship with her? because he finds her hot or attractive? Goodness. That's what happened. Molly's no longer on this planet because of the defendant. All of the evidence here points to one verdict. The defendant, Christian Bahena Rivera, is guilty of murder in the first degree. That is your verdict. Thank you.
You don't decide this case based upon emotions. You don't decide this case with emotions tugging at your heartstrings. You have to ask yourself if this crime could have been committed by 5'7" 125-pound Christian Bahena in that short time frame. Could he have overpowered this woman? Could he have stabbed her 9 times, tossed her in the trunk, and then headed south? That makes no sense. You saw Christian Bahena's testimony. He sat there yesterday, and he gave you his version of the events. It makes every bit as much sense as the state's theory that an undocumented immigrant runs up alongside Molly Tibbetts on a highway in broad daylight, gets angry, and decides to stab her. Absolutely does. We think Christian's confession or his statement was inaccurate. It was false. You see here, he fell asleep 3 different times. Who better to pick than an undocumented immigrant who doesn't speak the language, who has nobody here to speak of to help him out? Folks, there is serious doubt in this case. Serious doubt. Christian Bahena Rivera has not had the case against him proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And the only verdict that you can come up with under these facts and what you heard right there is not guilty. Thank you.
The jury was out for some 7 hours, over 2 days.
In my head, I said, for me to score a touchdown, I'm going to have to break a big one.
Why is it taking so long?
The longer it goes, the more worried you get, and everybody's nervous. You don't really look at anybody.
In my head, I so said, damn, I need a touchdown.
Until
for me to take a touchdown,
the jury comes in.
There go, 200 yards rushing.
At this time, Mr. Bahena, I'm going to ask that you rise along with your attorneys, please. And I would ask that the court attendant read the jury's verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Christian Bahena Rivera, guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree.
I mean, we had a situation where a client gave a statement, and he had her DNA in the trunk, and he led him to the body. That's all pretty incriminating evidence.
Exactly, right. When I'm like, led him to the body.
Mr. Bahena Rivera, you and you alone forever changed the lives of those who love Molly Tibbetts. And for that, you and you alone will receive the following sentence. A lifetime sentence with no eligibility for parole.
I think part of her legacy is the effect that her disappearance and her life that was cut short had on the nation and world.
A statue dedicated to Molly Tibbetts and the artwork of children she had hoped to one day work with are now on display near the place where she was killed.
Seeing those kids painting and sewing quilts, this is important to us. It's exactly how she would have painted it, I think.
Molly's parents hope their daughter will be remembered not for how she died, but for how she lived.
I'm on the Pingree Park Road, and I have a dead body.
They did find a body. What?
It was one clean cut very deeply into his neck. From left to right.
Scott, in our minds, was the victim of a random act of crime, which doesn't happen in Greeley.
The only thing that could have kept him from performing with us is if he was deathly ill or if, he wasn't with us anymore.
There was a surveillance camera, and that showed a man driving Scott's car. That was the mystery man. They knew it wasn't Scott.
We, at that point, found a Kevin Dean Eastman.
I've never even seen the streets you guys are calling Scott. You took Scott up there, didn't you? You and Heather took Scott up there.
Kevin was in an on-again, off-again relationship with Heather. There was a domestic violence history between the two.
I believe it was her right side of her face was really beaten up, like really bad. It was black and blue. Her wrist had been broken.
She never called police to report him missing or dead. Everybody thought that she had something to do with this. She continued to go to work. She continued to go shopping, continued to get her nails done.
Let me help this man get to the bottom of this case. Please keep Heather safe.
Your wife is in a bar. You said she's unresponsive.
This is what he's going to tell you.
How to get out of that situation. And I grabbed the gun.
Trying to find the first place to put a body.
No, sir. The only thing they could do was kill him.
You want to say anything?
We, the jury, and to find the defendant.
All right, y'all. We are the movers and shakers. Scott and Sessions on the Joe.
What Scott brought was not only the amazing trumpet, but it was his character and his boyish humor.
And Mr. Scott Sessions right here, ladies and gentlemen.
He loved the fellowship that we had on stage. He just got caught up in the music, and the music actually just drives the beat.
There was always passion in everything Scott did, especially when it came to music. That was his love, that was his life.
He loved playing taps for veteran services.
Scott's love for God, Scott's love for country, Scott's love for people. When he played that rendition of Taps, you could tell it really came out in what he was feeling in his heart at the time that he played it.
Good afternoon, Greeley, Colorado. It is February 8th, 2020. We've got your evening forecast here for you now. If you're going out tonight, don't forget your winter coat because it's
On
another
a snowy February night in his hometown of Greeley, Colorado, Scott was set to be part of the band for an Elvis impersonator.
It was just getting closer and closer to showtime, and he wasn't there. And so, the show must go on. And, during halftime, we're all going, I wonder where Scott's at. Everybody's texting, everybody's calling, nothing going on. Knowing Scott, the only thing that could have kept him from performing with us is if he was deathly ill or if, he wasn't with us anymore.
The time it was snowing pretty consistently that morning. A snowplow driver was driving in the area of Pingree Park, which is approximately 40 to 50 miles to the north.
I'm on the Pingree Park Road at the Monument Gulch exit, and I have a dead body.
Okay, we'll get help on the way. Are you able to provide any details?
Well, there was a tree on fire, and I went up to put it out. And he's laying next to it.
Okay, and do you believe he's gotten any help?
Yeah, he's definitely passed away.
It was the body of Scott Sessions.
Mr. Sessions' body was heavily burned. It was charred, wrapped in a blue blanket and some plastic, and it was secured with duct tape.
It was crushing. It was very crushing. Scott was not somebody that had enemies. Scott was not somebody that people didn't like. Scott, in our minds, was the victim of a random act of crime, which doesn't happen in Greeley.
Now, bear in mind, I had a wife that was dying. I told her about Scotty was murdered, and her only response for the next 2 or 3 months she lived, who in the world would want to kill my Scotty? Who would do that to my Scotty?
At Scott's home, detectives found the password to access his last Facebook Messenger conversation.
And that was with a woman ultimately identified was Heather Frank.
Nobody even knew that he had a relationship with Heather Frank. Not his family, not his friends, not even his band members.
She was a waitress at Doug's Day Diner. She was known as a loving mother. She had 3 boys. She loved jazz music. She went to a lot of shows. We also knew that she had a history of alcohol abuse.
On Saturday, February 8th, Scott was making plans to see Heather.
This was the first major break in our case, was that he had gone to Heather Frank's house, and that was the last known contact. The second major break was when we found his vehicle parked in the King Soopers parking lot across the street from Heather's residence.
And that surveillance camera showed a man driving Scott's car and parking his car and getting out of the car and walking away from the car the day after Scott was murdered.
It was a little blurry. You couldn't make out a face, but you could tell that there was a subject that was wearing winter clothing and that he had gotten out and paid particular attention to the vehicle, walking around it several times. And when we found the vehicle, the floor mat was outside underneath the car, and the car was unlocked. The keys were in the ignition.
That was the mystery man. They knew it wasn't Scott.
We ended up putting up a surveillance camera on a light post in the cul-de-sac facing towards her apartment, and we at that point found a vehicle that belonged to Kevin Dean Eastman.
Kevin was in an on-again, off-again relationship with Heather. They found that there was an arrest warrant out of Denver Police Department where Kevin had abused Heather, and so they already knew that he had an arrest warrant. They found out that there was a domestic violence history between the two. He was an oil field worker. Everybody speaks highly of him. They think that he's a very nice guy. But when alcohol's involved for Kevin, things change.
Cell phone data indicated that Heather and Kevin were at the apartment when Scott arrived.
That was the last known contact that we had with Scott that night.
3 cell phones were pinging at that same address for a very long time. That tells us that all 3 were there, and since Scott is missing, that's the concern, that something happened at that address.
We started putting together a theory. The theory was either Kevin or Heather got him to her apartment to where he was ambushed.
The following morning, we had surveillance video that showed Kevin Eastman's car traveling to and from the area where the body was located. So we had them being the last people to likely see Scott alive, and then we had information connecting them to the body being dumped in the mountains.
The surveillance now on Heather's apartment was 24/7, as both she and Eastman came and went.
Heather was very much a suspect. She never called police to report him missing or dead. She went shopping. She got her nails done. She acted as though nothing had happened for several days after a man was brutally killed inside her home.
And reported on time at the diner where she worked.
Her boss noticed that she was definitely distraught and just not put together like she normally would be.
And ultimately, we applied for arrest warrants for first-degree murder for Kevin Eastman and Heather Frank.
The plan was to arrest both of them the following morning.
We had seen Heather walking out of the apartment carrying a coat. She appeared that she was unsteady on her feet, and Kevin was following right behind her. She voluntarily got into the passenger seat of Kevin's vehicle. They never returned. Early in the morning on the 16th, we realized that Kevin Eastman and Heather Frank had left her apartment about 5:30 the evening prior.
Police had put a tracker device on his car, and it showed Eastman drove out of town to a farm belonging to a friend, Troy Bennell. A sheriff's deputy was dispatched first thing the next morning.
He set up surveillance, used binoculars, and he saw that Kevin Eastman, he was able to positively identify him, was tending a burn pit. He followed him to a gas station.
And the detective was obviously wondering where Heather Frank was because she wasn't in the car.
And saw that he was filling up gas cans. And that's when he decided to make contact with Kevin Eastman and arrest him.
When he was arrested, he had a large knife on his person. He also had what they eventually find in his pockets were 2 spent .22 shell casings.
Okay. My name's Justin. I'm going to shake your hand, but nice to meet you. Sorry that you're in those handcuffs. Go and have a seat for me. We were at that time still trying to figure out where Heather Frank was.
So when was the last time you actually saw Heather?
It was yesterday.
Okay. Did you guys do anything fun for the 14th for Valentine's Day?
No, because we had disagreement on the 13th. Yeah, but I asked her to marry me, and she said there's no way she can marry me.
Okay. How'd that make you feel?
Deflated. Yeah, just like a worthless pile of shit.
At the beginning, he's playing it pretty cool. He's cooperative with the 2 detectives that were interviewing him.
So, the reason why we're here talking is because we have been looking at somebody's social media site, okay? And that person had contact with Heather last week, okay? And I'm sure that you've probably heard or seen stuff in the news about somebody disappearing from Greeley. Do you know anything about that?
Is it a musician?
Is it a musician? Yeah, he was a musician.
Yeah, Heather showed me that on her phone.
There's really a game of cat and mouse that begins being played by both parties, where he's trying to figure out what they know, and they're trying to withhold as much information as they can, but still progress the interview. And eventually they start disclosing to him more of the evidence that they had in their possession.
You gotta remember that we got your vehicle on camera driving up Highway 14 going to the Hooter Canyon in a snowstorm. You took Scott up there, didn't you? You and Heather took Scott up there.
I've never even seen this dude. You guys are calling Scott.
Hey, Kevin, there's something else we know, too. Saturday night, you, Heather, and Scott were all at Heather's house. We know that. Okay, so why don't you walk us through what happened?
Tell us what happened with Scott.
Tell us about being there with Scott.
Now, we know that you were there.
I don't remember anything.
Here's the thing,
Dude
Kevin.
named Scott.
Okay. So you're at this house with Heather, with Scott, the guy that you know she has slept with.
That would be awkward.
That would be very awkward. Tell us what happened there. You're with your person you proposed to a week later.
Right.
And Scott's there.
I don't even remember anybody named Scott. But I know.
Did you not know his name?
No, I don't know his name.
I don't think that you intended to go over there and hurt him. But it did. It happened. You went over there, you saw him, and you got upset. And things went bad from there.
I can't even remember being there, guys.
He claimed he wasn't at the scene, but then he started throwing out some other possible scenarios and hypotheticals. He's inferring that Heather Frank killed Scott Sessions the night before when Scott Sessions showed up for this date.
Okay, she told me that, she told him no, and he just kept going. And that he raped her. And I feel bad speaking ill of the dead, right? Because that's not very polite. And I feel bad breaking her confidence.
Was Heather defending herself against this guy? You went over there, she freaked out, there was a mess, and being the devoted partner you are to her,
You helped her, didn't you?
you cleaned up Heather's mess.
It's okay.
Well, I know that I sure love her a lot.
As the interrogation was underway, detectives carried out a search warrant on Troy Bonnell's ranch, looking for a possible murder weapon.
I don't know how these got like that, but it's okay. But
Other detectives were searching Heather's apartment.
Mr. Easton actually gave us a challenge while we were there that says if our crime scene people were actually worth anything, they would find the blood.
If you guys' snacks are any good, they'll be able to find it for sure.
So there was a lot of blood there. Describe it to us.
I didn't see it. It had to be someplace serious for that amount of blood.
Where was the blood at?
Everywhere. Everywhere.
That was a very strange statement. It puts Mr. Eastman there,
the
and puts
bucket.
him in the crime scene. It was, it told me that he knew that this was a very violent crime.
Please, dear Father, let me help these men get to the bottom of this case. Please. Please, God. Please keep Heather safe.
We were still trying to figure out where Heather Frank was.
She had an arrest warrant out for her.
Everybody thought that she had something to do with this.
Detectives had worked into the evening hours, searching the property belonging to Troy Bonnell, and he was brought in for questioning.
I know it feels like I've been stalling for time here, and I have a little bit, because sometimes I get information that I'm not allowed to share, and I gotta wait until they let me share it.
Okay.
Everything was dark, but toward the end of the day,
They did find a body.
What?
Yes, sir.
With 2 gunshot wounds to the chest, wrapped in plastic and baling wire, underneath a pile of stuff that was scheduled to be burned.
They believe it's a female, so obviously you know what we're thinking. That it's Heather.
Jesus Christ!
In the other interrogation room with Kevin Eastman, detectives were also getting the word.
And you can see them getting information through their phones.
Whatever had her upset, I don't know.
So we found Heather. And Heather is in the same condition that Scott is.
All right, Kevin. Heather's dead. You know she's dead. Scott's dead. Heather can't be dead. You need to start talking to us.
He was upset that he thought that we were playing games with him.
Want to get fair. You know? God. Trying to get cool better, man. That's punching below the belt, guys. Give me a second.
Kevin, breathe. Okay. Hey, Kevin, pick your head up and breathe, okay? In and out. In through your nose, and out through your mouth.
At Heather's apartment, the forensics team found the pool of blood, just as Eastman had predicted they would, after pulling back the carpeting and a black rubber mat.
There was so much blood that came from Scott's death that the blood soaked through the carpet, the padding, and into the surface wood of the floor.
And detectives believed the blood told the story of what happened.
Kevin probably hid behind the door, and as soon as Scott walked through, it was a surprise from behind. It was one clean cut very deeply into his neck, from left to right, and it spanned from all the way around to the back, or right beside the spine on the right side. He was caught from behind and ambushed.
And detectives suspected that the messages Heather had sent to Scott were actually sent by Eastman using her phone.
You were setting this guy up. You were going to ambush him.
Why would I say him up? Why would I just? Because she's old. That's what she does.
She's having sex with him, and it was the final straw. You set this guy. Kevin, I'm just telling you what some people might say.
Great.
You set this guy up. You lured him to Heather's house. You killed him, okay?
And detectives discounted Eastman's claims that it was Heather who killed Scott Sessions.
We don't really know what Heather was doing. She may have been forced to watch. I don't think that she would have had the physical strength to commit the murder. I don't think it's likely.
But there was still suspicion about the role of Troy Bunnell in Heather's murder.
His DNA was found on a cigarette pack that was wrapped up with Heather Frank's body.
And Bunnell was evasive when detectives questioned him about what happened to Heather.
Well, and obviously we're trying to figure out how that body showed up on your property.
Me? Please, I don't even know this. I don't even know who this guy is. You know, I'm just not that guy.
Okay.
He had no motive or reason to want to kill Heather Frank, whereas Kevin Eastman did, namely that that Heather was the witness to his murder of Scott Sessions, and therefore that she was the one that could turn him in.
We're not lying to you. Everything that we've talked about, we've told you is the truth.
And you know it's the truth.
Heather is dead.
I think that we were just getting closer. He got to a point where he said,
Can I get a lawyer? I'm sorry, guys. Thank you. I'm sorry I let you down. My life's over no matter what, guys.
and we had to stop the interview at that point.
Larimer County investigators arrested Kevin Dean Eastman on Sunday. He was booked on suspicion of first-degree murder and tampering with a deceased human body.
That's when we realized it definitely wasn't a random act of crime. Scott was taken from this world in an act of jealousy, vengeance, hatred.
Kevin Dean Eastman is standing trial for the murders of both his ex-girlfriend, Heather Frank, and her love interest, Stanley Scott Sessions.
He was emotional for a lot of people. Everybody knew Scott either from high school or from music or from church, and that is just the small town feel that Greeley has always had.
And the prosecution may deliver their opening statement.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Power, control, coercion, and revenge. At its very core, this case is about domestic violence. These hands killed Scott Sessions and Heather Frank, wrapped their bodies in plastic, set one on fire, and was preparing to burn the other. These hands are the hands of the murderer. These are the hands of the defendant, Kevin Eastman. All the credible evidence in this case, all of it, will lead you to one person. It's a person you've already met, and that is the defendant, Kevin Eastman.
The prosecution's strongest physical evidence was the blood of Scott Sessions found on some of Kevin Eastman's clothing.
So that certainly helped connect him to the Scott Sessions murder.
And Eastman's DNA found on the baling wire used to wrap Heather's body.
And that was really significant.
But investigators could never definitively link the knife and the shell casings found in Eastman's possession to the two murders.
It was very much a large circumstantial evidence case. There were, some weapons that weren't found at all.
Does the defense wish to deliver an opening statement?
Yes, sir. An early hunch became an assumption on which this case was built. And that assumption was that Mr. Eastman was the type of person who was violent in the past with a partner, so he would be violent with anyone in the future. And that assumption was that he must have been so irately jealous that Miss Frank had moved on to someone new that he slit someone's throat and took life. But these assumptions, like most, were inaccurate and not based on actualities.
It was obvious that he was going to try and paint Heather as the killer of Scott Sessions.
Now, when Mr. Sessions' body was located at Pingree Park, they wanted to know who was it that wrapped Mr. Sessions' head in duct tape before his body was burned. And the DNA on that duct tape was Miss Frank's.
They painted a picture that Heather had killed Scott because Scott had raped her. The victim was being put on trial.
Over 2 years of investigation, and the government will still not be able to show you any murder weapon. They will not be able to tell you where Miss Frank was killed, and they will not be able to present you with any forensic or physical evidence that connects Mr. Eastman to either homicide. You will have doubts. You will have hesitations. And because you have those doubts, because you have those hesitations, the only verdict will be not guilty. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. McLaughlin.
Good morning.
Who is your mother?
Well, she was a beautiful lady.
What was her name?
Heather Frank.
Alex McLaughlin was called as a witness to the abuse his mother suffered at the hands of Kevin Eastman.
Mr. McLaughlin, how would you describe the nature of the relationship between your mother and the defendant while they were together?
I would say toxic.
Can you describe for the jury, first of all, what injuries that you saw on your mother?
When I seen her, she had a slash in her throat, like a knife, like a cut in her throat. I believe it was her right side of her face was really beaten up, like really bad. It was black and blue. Her wrist had been broken.
And do you know if your mother ever reported that incident?
Not that I don't think so.
A friend of Heather's, Anthony Velarde, recalled a text message he received from Eastman.
The messages
pretty much said that he was married to Mrs. Frank, to leave her alone, or he was going to, can I say it?
Yes.
He was going to kill me. He was going to stab me in the face, in the neck. He was a roughneck. He worked in the oil field, blah, blah, blah.
And no one will find your body.
Correct.
The prosecution wanted the jury to understand why Heather never called police after Scott was killed.
Could Heather have saved Heather? Could Heather still be alive today had she notified police? Kevin may have been threatening to hurt her children. She was doing basically what she had to do in order to survive herself. And at some point, that didn't last anymore.
We are live in the Kevin Dean Eastman trial out in Colorado. On the stand right now is Troy Bonnell. Heather Frank's body was found on his property. So it becomes a question of what exactly was his involvement in all of this?
Let me advise the jurors that Mr. Bonnell has a pending criminal case.
One of the hard parts of the case was proving that it was Kevin Eastman that was responsible for shooting Heather Frank and not Troy Bonnell.
Did you have any involvement in Heather Frank's death?
No.
Did you have any involvement in wrapping up her body in plastic and baling wire?
No.
Did you have any involvement in moving her deceased body at any point?
No.
Ms. Devereaux, you're welcome to conduct cross-examination. Mr. Bonnell, you're still under oath, okay?
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Mr. Bonnell.
Good morning.
They beat him up pretty bad. He was impeached by a lot of his prior inconsistent statements.
And you told Detective Schall, quote, that you did not even know these people, referring to Mr. Eastman and Miss Frank.
Did not know what?
You said, and I quote, that you, quote, don't even know these people.
Correct.
And then his evasive answers when detectives asked him why his DNA was found on a cigarette pack next to Heather's body.
I had no explanation.
Right.
Other than...
No, I'm asking the questions, okay? You could never provide Detective Porter or Detective Geyer on that date an explanation.
No.
And they told you that this was a problem.
Okay, yes.
They told you it was likely a problem that needed to be fixed because someone could use it to paint you as a suspect.
I don't recall that conversation.
Troy Bonnell was an easy target as an alternate suspect. He was involved in some shady things, and he had a significant prior criminal history that didn't paint him in a positive light, for sure.
You have been asked a lot of questions on cross-examination where you said you couldn't remember.
Yes.
Sir, did you have any reason to kill Scott Sessions on February 8th or February 9th?
No.
Were you involved in that death in any way?
No.
Or the cover-up of that death?
No.
Turning to 1 week later, February 15th into the 16th, did you have any reason to shoot Heather Frank twice in the chest?
No.
Were you involved in that act?
No.
Did you have any reason to cover up that murder?
No.
Kevin showed almost no emotion most time when during testimony. When he would walk into the courtroom, sometimes he would smile at his defense team, but he, for the most part, showed no emotion at all throughout the entire trial.
And the prosecution may deliver their closing argument.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This tragedy, this loss of life, had one common denominator, and it was Kevin Eastman. And it was his actions, and his actions alone, that resulted in the deaths of Heather Frank and Scott Sessions. But they didn't just die. They were brutally murdered. One ambushed, one shot to the heart. Coincidence? No way. Every piece of incredible evidence in this case points to one reasonable conclusion. He is guilty of each and every one of these crimes. We'd ask that you return verdicts consistent with that finding. Thank you.
Thank you.
For the defense's closing, lawyer Ashley Morris presented an alternative theory of what happened.
He did not kill Mr. Sessions. He did not kill Miss Frank. Miss Frank killed Mr. Sessions, and Mr. Eastman helped in the aftermath, as did Mr. Bonnell. She took matters into her own hands. She made him pay for what he did to her. And then Mr. Bonnell panicked, and he killed Miss Frank, concealing her body on his property and concealing her death from Mr. Eastman. You may not like Mr. Eastman, and you don't have to. He certainly made mistakes. He's been abusive in the past, and he owns them. You don't have to condone what he did in the aftermath. You don't have to condone his prior abuse. But you cannot let these feelings interfere with your decision in the case. The prosecution has not been able to answer the essential questions in this case. The who, what, when, where, and how for each of these homicides. Therefore, I'm confident that you will find Mr. Eastman not guilty of killing Mr. Sessions and killing Miss Frank. Thank you.
Good afternoon. You're welcome to be seated.
I was sitting next to Scott's father in the courtroom when the verdict was delivered.
As it relates to count number 1, murder in the first degree involving victim Stanley Scott Sessions, the verdict reads, we the jury find the defendant Kevin Dean Eastman guilty of murder in the first degree.
Stan fist pumped, and that was all he did. He just fist pumped, and then he bowed his head, and he prayed.
As it relates to count number 2, murder in the first degree involving victim Heather Frank, the verdict reads as follows. We, the jury, find the defendant Kevin Dean Eastman guilty of murder in the first degree.
There was no reaction. He just sat there. There was no, he just sat there. He just sat there and stared at the judge as the judge read guilty after guilty after guilty, 7 different counts.
Thank you for your time.
You can't get any better than guilty on all counts.